Three, two, one.
PVO. Positive vibes. This is the PVO show.
Today is Sunday. It's August 28th. It's still hot. It's humid. I'm sure out there it's more humid, I believe, than Texas.
Probably here in South Florida it is very hot and very humid.
Was living down in Dallas a good setup for Florida as far as weather?
In certain ways, obviously I spent a lot of time in the Northeast, and I'm originally from California, so I am no stranger to humid summers. But I think in certain ways, Dallas or I'd say Florida is kind of like a mix between Texas and New York. You kind of got certain aspects of each state in one place. So in that regard, yeah, for sure, made the transition pretty easy.
That's dope. And so this is, by the way, this is Dr. Justin Bellamy. Bellamy. I'm telling you, same with Brandon, man. It's like a tongue twister.
Comes right out, just like Brendan the Lean.
Yeah. So we met when I was doing my second year with Dr. Rorick, and you were just coming in from NYU to finish off your, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is not your last year. This is an additional year of focused training, right?
Right. So I did 6 years of plastic surgery residency training at NYU, and then subsequently spent 1 year of additional training to get sort of specialized aesthetic surgery training under Dr. Rorick, with whom you were working with at the time, and that's how we met in Dallas.
And I was mentioning that earlier that it was kind of cool to see the dynamics of, for instance, even throughout the fellowship program, where I got to see a couple working in the medical field, and because your girlfriend was a nurse and you were a fellow at the time, and you were talking about the dynamics of that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that it's not uncommon for people who work in the same field or at the same institution to be dating. So that was the scenario for me when I came to Dallas. I brought with me my girlfriend, who I had met as a resident at NYU, where she was a plastic surgery OR nurse. And you mentioned to me earlier that you were impressed by how professional and how you sort of wouldn't have guessed that we were.
No,
and that's
never guessed.
Yeah, that's no. But I think that's that's deliberate, and that's also how it was pretty easy and natural, because that's how it started. It was always kind of like that.
It was there was already like a formula to it.
Right. So which is a little bit different than if you start dating someone and then you guys work together in the future, and all of a sudden now you have to act differently in front of other people. It was never like that. It was other way around.
Versus what it was before. So you're like, well, just act like how it was before.
Right.
That's cool. Mm-hmm. So so now that you've been it has to be a year this month, right?
I've been in Florida now for a year and a year and 2 months, actually.
Nice. And so how has it been having your own practice? You joined a partnership, right? With another practice.
Yeah. So I joined an existing practice here with an older surgeon who's probably, within 5 to 8 years of retiring, who has a very busy practice in South Florida and, the Palm Beach area. So I joined. I have a little bit different interest in the type of surgery I want to do. But there's a lot of overlap between the two of us. The practice is busy enough that, and there's a lot of foot traffic coming through. There's actually 3 nurse or PA injectors as well in the practice. So there's an esthetician, 2 estheticians. It's a pretty busy practice with a lot of foot traffic, 2 operating rooms. 1 or 2 surgeons is operating every day. So it's a nice practice, and the transition's been good. It's nothing like, we work together at DPSI or Dallas Plastic Surgery. That's a totally different ball game, but that's a very unique and rare situation.
That's what I wanted to ask you though. Being in Florida, what are you coming across a lot as far as types of surgery being requested or asked or performing?
So I'm, in an interesting place in Florida because I am north of Miami by about an hour and a half.
Oh, so you're basically there.
The culture of plastic surgery is a little different. I actually love South Florida. I've loved South Florida for a long time, but I was always very hesitant to come practice plastic surgery here because I was worried about the stigma of plastic surgery in Miami of kind of being high volume place. But a little bit north where I am in Palm Beach, that's not the case. So I do sort of everything. There's in my practice, I offer rhinoplasty, and there isn't that much. There's some rhinoplasty available in South Florida, but it's not like Dallas. So having that specialized rhinoplasty training from Dallas,
like BBLs and stuff like that.
I do a lot of BBLs as well. That's obviously very common in Miami, but there aren't as many surgeons doing it in my area. So I do a lot of BBLs, and that is a very rewarding procedure. You see the results right away.
Oh yeah.
A lot of makeovers. There's everything here in South Florida. People are in the sun, aging a little faster than they probably like, and people here care about looking good, just like they do in Dallas. So looking their best. So there's a lot to do here.
That's cool, man. So let me let's take it back. I've always wanted to know a couple of things about you. Even when we met, you don't really get to know a lot in the workplace because you're always like talking about sutures and stuff. But what is your background? Where do you come from? And if you could start off as a child.
Sure. So I was born in Long Beach, California. I lived in LA for the first couple years of my life. My parents were divorced when I was 5, and that was also about the time the LA riots were going on in LA. So my mom took me and my sister, and we moved north in California to sort of the Central Valley of California, which is, for most people probably don't realize this, but California has big cities, LA, San Francisco, but in the middle of California is very agricultural. So I actually lived in the middle of nowhere on a ranch when I was sort of in my elementary school years. And my mom met my stepfather at that time. He was actually a resident in primary care doing rural medicine. So that's why we sort of lived in the middle of nowhere for a few years. And then my mom wanted to go back to school. She was a physical therapist. She wanted to change careers. So she wanted to go back to school. She got accepted to grad school at UC Berkeley, and we moved to the Bay Area, which is where I did my middle school and high school in the San Francisco Bay Area in the East Bay. So I was there through high school. I did the usual things, played multiple sports. I wrestled, played football, ran track.
Wait. You were a wrestler?
I was a wrestler in high school.
You can't just gloss over that.
No basketball for me. I realized quickly basketball wasn't for me. And I started wrestling. I played football first, and then I started wrestling. And that was a great experience for me because
that's what I was going to ask, because wrestling's a hard sport. It's like a mental sport, right?
Yeah, it definitely builds discipline. I would never say that wrestling was at any point fun, but it was rewarding.
It's a grind, being right? Fun. It's just a grind.
It was a grind, yeah, but it definitely builds character. And honestly, if I ever had children or a son or daughter, I would highly encourage them to wrestle, because it definitely built habits that carried me, into the future. At challenging parts. When you're in those sort of situations, and I went all out. I did all of it. I did the weight cutting and everything. I went through sort of the ringer with wrestling.
And y'all weight cut a lot, right? Like consistently every week.
I have some, crazy memories. Just like, at that time it was just total absolutism. No butter on toast. No, just things that don't even necessarily really make sense, but it was just a mindset to lose that weight. And then, after the first 2 months or a month of the season, you're at 4 or 5% body fat already. And then you got to lose weight to actually make weight. And you are literally just sweating it out. It's, I'm sure, horrible for your body. And after I did it, I never would have wanted to do it again. But, actually my last year of high school, I didn't join the wrestling team because I was so burnt out until about halfway through the season. And I kind of regretted it. And I joined. And instead of cutting weight, I didn't. I just wrestled at my own natural weight or even above my own weight. And I actually did better just because I was more energetic. I had the energy that you don't otherwise have when you're, pushing your body like that by not eating and not drinking.
Well, yeah, because you can also have kidney failure, right? From just doing it consistently, and your body goes to shock and just...
You could probably.
You're depleting.
You could probably hurt yourself if you did too much.
Yeah, even like concussions, let's say like your brain, all that fluid's gone and you're getting thrown around. And so I can only imagine like the freak accidents in wrestling.
Yeah, it was one of those things where after I cut weight really hard one year, and I was so burnt out, and I dreaded going back the next year. This is why I joined late the final season. So honestly, there is some truth to that, and honestly, this kind of relates to medicine too, where there's some truth to the fact that the thought that it's it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you may be very eager to kind of do your best, or be very competitive and cut all the weight you can, or whatever. Try your hardest from the beginning. But if you burn out and then you end up not being able to finish the race, or not being able to sort of continue, then you're not better off. So that was sort of my approach when I did come back at the end of my senior year. Was I took the more relaxed route, and I actually did better because I had more energy.
Nice. So how did you segue from wrestling to going to school for pre-med?
So I went to public school always growing up, and then I always did well in school. At that point, I was working hard in school, doing well, expected to go to a good school, expected to go to UC Berkeley, which is kind of where most of the people who did very well in high school went. And then some people who went to Yale from 2 years older than me came to visit. And it was never on my mind. They're like, oh, you should apply. And I thought to myself, like, no way. So anyway, I applied, and my mom was actually very nervous about me applying because she was worried that if I were accepted, she would have to, and it was too expensive, she would have to, crush my dreams by saying I couldn't go. And she was very nervous that she was going to be in that position.
Oh,
I sort of skipped over the part here where my mother and my stepfather had divorced when I was in 8th grade. So he was a physician, but was no longer necessarily in the picture at that point. So my mom was, again, a single mom, very worried that her son was going to not be able to go to school because
Yale.
of her financial situation. Yeah. So she was a little nervous about that because we didn't realize, and this is the case, and so I tell everyone now, that actually these private universities with huge endowments are cheaper to attend than your public state school, at least in California, depending on your state. I think it's different in Florida, but
hold on, question, because I just thought about this. If you're gonna go to these schools, right, like a Harvard or pre-med, even like NYU, do you want to go there in your later years or in the beginning of your college? Do you want to get your, how does that work, or what would you like? Do you understand what I'm saying?
You mean like getting your AA and then transferring, or something, like getting your 2-year degree and then transferring?
Like, where does it mean more towards your career, and just as far as like your journey in college, university, pre-med, residency, and all that stuff?
I would say that the wisdom that people get is that you're only as good, if you want to say good and bad, but you're only as qualified. It only helps you as much as the last place you were. So if you went to Yale undergrad and then you didn't do very well, and you barely got into medical school, and you didn't do well in tests, and you barely got into a residency program.
Keep going. I'm gonna check with the thing. Keep going.
Yeah, sure. If that all happens, then you're only as good as the last place you were. You can't really fall back on the fact that, well, you went to college at this university that has a good name, therefore, you should be more credible. So 100% for sure, it does matter most where you last went. That being said, I will say, and this is from firsthand experience, that once you kind of break into that world, your credibility from that point forward will skyrocket, because so once I had that on my CV that, I went to Yale University, and it's not just going there, but it's going there, it's being around those motivated people, it's being inspired by the people around you.
The 1%.
Right. You're making connections. People who are known in the field can write you letters of recommendation. They can make phone calls for you, stuff that you just won't have access to if you didn't break in. So, yeah. So even though, I say, you're only as good as the last thing that you did. However, the earlier you can kind of break into that, the more it can kind of snowball into something that impacts your future more significantly. So for me, for sure, that was sort of like a life-changing event, was, getting into Yale for undergrad, because that sort of set the stage for going to Hopkins for medical school, which set the stage, connections I made there, people I met there, set the stage for me getting into plastic surgery at NYU, which is a very strong, or the number one plastic surgery training program in the U.S., which then made the connections again to Dr. Rourke, which led me to Dallas, which is how we met. So all of those things, it's the butterfly effect. If you change one little thing, I would probably at least have trained other places, and who knows if I would even be a plastic surgeon. Who knows?
You might have been a wrestler that made his way to the UFC.
Yeah, who knows?
And so, when did you realize you want to be a plastic surgeon? Do you recall that moment, that moment of like epiphany where you're like, whoa, this is it?
Yeah. So, everybody's different, but I am once I decide something, it's 100% decided in my mind. There's no questioning it. I do a lot of research up front to make sure that's what I want or what I want to do. But once I figured it out, there's no looking back or second guessing. So for me, it was stepwise. In high school, figured out, I always liked science and math and all that. And I knew I didn't want to be anything to do with writing papers, English, history, anything like that. I wanted to be something in science or math.
Yeah.
And it was I thought I'd be an engineer. I did this engineering internship when I was in high school, and the idea of it was cool, but the reality, the day-to-day work wasn't so interesting to me. So then I decided, okay, fine, I'll be a doctor. There's a lot of different versions of doctors. I saw what my stepdad was doing as a primary care physician. I didn't think it was for me either, but I realized there was more to medicine than just that. So so as soon as I got to college, I was pre-med, and I started exploring. I already decided that. So I knew I was going to be a doctor. I started exploring medicine, the different fields. I actually for a long time thought I was going to go into radiation oncologists, which they're the doctors that administer and make the plans for radiation therapy for patients who have cancer. And I was volunteering at a hospice center, and I was really motivated about end of life care. It's a very impactful thing, both for the patient and for the volunteer or the provider. Yeah. So I did that for about a year in college. And then again, it was one of those situations where the idea of it is nice, but then, there's a lot of physics and math and imaging and, top of the line technology in radiation oncology. But the day-to-day work that you're doing is kind of make the plan and then someone else executes it for you. It just wasn't as rewarding for me, the actual day-to-day work. So that's when I got onto the idea, okay, maybe I should be a surgeon. So I started shadowing all these different surgeons, orthopedic surgeons, general surgeons. I shadowed several different orthopedic surgeons, spine surgeons, cancer orthopedic surgeon. And then one of the last surgeons I shadowed right at the end of college was a plastic surgeon, a craniofacial, so a pediatric craniofacial plastic surgeon. And it was part that the work was interesting, and the other half of it was just he was a great mentor. He was extremely available and extremely nice. He would, I was just a college student who didn't know what he was doing, and he would provide paper. He would have his resident send me papers so I could read up on the surgery for the next day, so I could at least have some concept or some idea about what they were doing the next day. He really let me participate sort of in the care of the patient, and I hadn't had anyone else do that. So that sort of sparked my interest in plastic surgery, which carried me into medical school. In medical school, again, right away, I got involved with the plastic surgery department. I had decided at that point, day one of medical school, I want to be a plastic surgeon. A lot of people, they say, don't get too stuck on something. When you go to medical school, you'll change your mind 5 times. What you think you're going to do in the beginning is not what you do in the end. I disagree with that. And I think for fields that are extremely competitive to do, like plastic surgery, dermatology, all these fields that are very hard to get into, the sooner you know what you want to do and the more you kind of throw yourself into it and start making connections and start sort of learning about the field, the better you'll be. So right away, I started doing that. And that was it. So I knew plastic surgery basically the end of college, day one of medical school.
That's really cool. It's kind of cool because I remember even Brendan told me that he had a thing where he shadowed in high school to make sure that that's what he wanted to do, or like community college, I think. Yeah. Either way, but I think that's a good way to get an idea of what to expect and get a feel for it, right? Because then you're like, okay, this is what it's like. These are the daily duties. These are like the results. This is what it all takes.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying before, that as soon as you are somewhere where you feel empowered that you can do that, so being at a university that has plastics, that has a hospital associated with it, that has plastic surgeons that you can email and they will trust you because you are coming from their institution, they'll let you shadow them. That is useful and powerful. I remember being a high school student, I would have had no idea. If I wanted to shadow a plastic surgeon, I wouldn't know where to begin. If I thought the idea is I wanted maybe to be a plastic surgeon, I should shadow at that time when I was in high school, there's no chance. I would have had no idea who to email, how to structure that email so that I had credibility and they would actually work out. But once you kind of have a little credibility to your name, all those possibilities kind of open up.
Okay, so I always ask when you decided to do an extra year of training, how, I guess, how normal is that? Because just me thinking as far as like all the school, all the debt, and I would imagine that a lot of people would be jonesing to start making money. How did you defer for another year?
Yeah, that's a good point. So in general, I would say it depends on where your training program is, but probably the minority of people do that extra year. And by the way, there are several different fellowships if you want to focus on something very specific.
The hand and
there's hand,
cranial,
there's microsurgery, craniofacial, aesthetic. There's a variety of fellowships burn. Now, if you know for sure you want to do something and you want to be the best you could possibly be at that, I think you have to do that extra. It doesn't matter how good the program is you trained at, you have to do that fellowship.
It's like having the edge.
But there's like I said, when I did that, I was 33 or something by that point, had been essentially in training that entire time. So it's very tempting to be like, hey, I'm 33, I'm ready to start, making a real paycheck here, but and start my practice. But again, that extra year gives you 10-year leg up on everybody else. Oh, wow. In terms of your confidence, your experience. It's like a booster to your career, both in terms of everything, in terms of how confident you'll be, how experienced you'll be, how good your results will be, which will make you busier in the long run. Could you, make do without that? Oh, for sure. 100%. And most people do. But, depending on what you want to do, if you want to do anything that's a little bit more specialized, like rhinoplasty, then it is invaluable if you go to the right program. And there aren't that many programs for aesthetic surgery.
Yeah.
There's really only 2 or 3 that are, I think worth the year. But, if you do that, I think it'll, jumpstart your career big time.
And from just my understanding of that world and seeing the side of aesthetic surgery, I didn't realize how complicated rhinoplasty was. As far as like the levels and from the other, like from a facelift to a brow lift, but the level to where now you're like seeing people with revisionist tertiaries because the one doctor they went to who had all these followers and knocked it out of the park. So why is rhinoplasty so complicated?
Well, that's the thing. There's, most surgery, so outside of plastic surgery, most surgeries, like if you go get your gallbladder removed or your knee replaced or something, most surgeries outside of plastic surgery have a very structured way they are done. It's, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, through 50, and then that's it. Whereas in plastic surgery, there's a lot more flexibility. You kind of learn the principles and you're applying the principles to new situations. So there's a little more of an artistic edge to it, but also there's on the flip side of that means there can be big differences from one surgeon to the next. So it really matters that you have the right surgeon for the right surgery. But within plastic surgery, there are certain ones that are a little bit more routine and others that have even more input from the surgeon. So, like a standard breast augmentation, there might be some people who are a little bit better than others, but for the most part, it's more like that step 1, 2, 3, 4. There's some decision-making things, what size, where do you place it? There's some of that going on.
Cool. Okay. So, now that you're done, what would you say, like, for your first year being in practice, what has been the one highlight of the year as far as something that pops out?
I'd say highlight, and this is not necessarily new to first year in practice, but just in general, as you kind of get deeper into caring for, having your own patients that are truly your patients that you have a relationship with, is seeing that change on their face when they kind of see their final result, and they sort of have that realization that it's very difficult to make that leap for a lot of patients. They've either never had, a lot of times these patients, they've never had surgery before. It's their first surgery. It's a big investment financially, time, recovery wise. It's scary to undergo surgery. And so when they finally get to the end of that and they're pleased and happy with what they've chosen to do, and I mean, that's a very sort of moving and rewarding experience. And I think why we do this.
That's pretty cool, man. Cause like, you physically changed your lives.
I know. I mean, it's
like
it's
you hear people say like, you changed my life, and it's always like an emotional reason, but like, no, you physically changed their lives.
Yeah, we physically changed something, and that got huge impacts. I mean, I know there, in some places in my household when I was growing up, plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery had like a negative stigma to it, but you realize it's not a big deal. You have the choice and the power to make these changes, and letting something like that hold you back from sort of realizing the best version of yourself or something that might make you more comfortable in your skin, it's kind of silly. And once you kind of get to the other end, you realize, man, why didn't I do this sooner?
So I had my exhibition shortly after y'all left, and it was called Vanity, right? And I'm touching on this because my whole point of Vanity was not only to show the side of surgery where, the stigmas lie on, and also like, a little dark shit, but also the positive aspect. And there's a case that Rorick had. She was born with hemangioma, and when she was a child, and she, this iconic picture, which I made a painting of her as probably, I want to say 2, 3. And she literally looked like a little nose, like it looked like a clown nose. And so I remember I was Dr. Burns who initially did the surgery, and then Rorick, because at the age of 16, I think she was eligible for a revision, right? And so when Rorick did the revision, keep in mind, this was a child, and then to see her at 16, and then she was like, she looked like a model, like you would have never guessed. And for me, I saw the positive aspect that like people you won't really hear about is how that surgery or those 2 surgeries gave her a chance to be a normal woman without any like notion of like what's going on with her nose.
Right. I mean, it happens all the time in reconstructive surgery that you're able to have a singular large impact on someone's life and the rest of their life, really the quality of their life. It's the same plastic surgery, neurosurgery, trauma surgery, you might be saving lives, and in plastic surgery, you're improving the quality of life. So
because it's logical, right?
That's very clearly the case in reconstructive surgery. But I have found that is not always, but often the case also in aesthetic surgery. And most of your patients in all plastic surgery, but this is definitely the case in aesthetic surgery. Your patients are healthy, normal people that you and I can relate to. Could be you or I, and you're helping them sort of get to the point that they want to be to realize the best version of themselves. And that in itself can be, whether it's extreme, like the example you gave, or something subtle, it can be very rewarding. I just had a patient who was very young, like not even in high school yet, young. I don't want to give away exact ages, but very, very young, and was being bullied in her middle school about her nose. And I performed a rhinoplasty for her, improved everything they're bullying her about, which from my perspective, her nose, I could see how I could improve it as a plastic surgeon, but I am surprised that children were picking up on this and bullying her. But again, by making that leap,
children are mean.
Yeah, it was life-changing for her. Whether that's right or wrong, people obviously shouldn't be bullying for any reason.
But
surgery shouldn't be the answer for bullying. But in this
kids at that age like to pick on like features.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool because you're changing people's lives, and I think that's beautiful because you're actually giving them more confidence. That confidence might give them that extra oomph to pursue whatever they're pursuing versus
the butterfly effect.
Exactly. It keeps them down, boxed in. Like I'm not, it's not meant for me. I'm just this person. I'm not good enough. And that's really cool. Now, what really blew my mind when I would be with the patients and they're talking about like their surgeries with Rorick, I was baffled the amount of people that weren't getting the revision because they wanted functionality. They're just getting revision because they want to look better, even though they couldn't breathe. And that blew my mind. Like people didn't even care about the functionality aspect. And even, Rorick would give them both. And I remember like in one case was like, oh, wow, my breathing. I didn't even realize that was going to be a thing. I'm like, wait, why are you getting revision if breathing better is not the objective?
Yeah, I mean, people will do a lot of things to look better. Sometimes they'll suffer it, and not being able to breathe is one of those things that they'll suffer through if it means they think they're going to look better. Now, the reality situation is, if you pick the right surgeon and you have the right surgery, your breathing is half the surgery. You're making your breathing better should be half the surgery in rhinoplasty. But yeah, that's definitely the case.
Do you see a lot of I guess botched jobs your way, come your way? Like you're like, when you're in there, you're like, oh my gosh, like where's the rib grab? Where's everything?
Yeah, I mean, you saw, obviously, when we were together in Dallas, you saw that stuff happens all the time. It's a professionalism thing, though. You don't really want to ever bash another surgeon's work, even if you might be thinking like, oh my God, what did they do? Because
definitely not dope board certified.
It's a poor taste to do that. And when it goes, like, for example, I would hate to be on the receiving end and hear that some other surgeon who doesn't know me was trying to say something negative to our mutual patient. That would be horrible. So I don't do it myself, but there's definitely moments where I think to myself, like, what are they thinking?
Yeah, no, and I'm not talking about as far as like who they are. I'm talking about just like, why would you've done this? Like, why did you do this?
Right, exactly.
Right? Like it baffles me. I remember like I saw like some random stuff coming out of people. Like I remember there was I don't know if it was you or Brandon, but there's like a plastic thing that was used, like it was outdated procedure on this young person, and it was just like, what?
Yeah.
What were they thinking?
You see a lot of the silicone implants coming out of Asia for Asian patients who are trying to dorsal augmentation.
I saw a dorsal flap because of that. Is that a thing?
Sometimes you'll see it usually in Asian patients who had surgery in Asia. Instead of using their own rib or cartilage, sometimes they'll get a physical implant, kind of like a solid breast implant.
Yeah.
Same material in their nose, silicone in their nose to augment their bridge up. The issue with that is anytime you're using a foreign body like an implant, it's fine on the breast where it's sterile, but the nose is not that clean. It's not truly sterile. So you always run the risk that those silicone implants could get seeded with bacteria and cause a problem
or erode through your over decades.
That's not a thing here, is it? Is that?
I'm sure there are people who are placing silicone implants in the nose. I don't do it. I use cartilage if I need to do dorsal augmentation or improving the height of the dorsum. Of the bridge. So I would not use it, but I'm sure there are people using it. Because again, it's only used in a very specific situation, which 99% of the time will be in an Asian patient who's trying to increase the height of their bridge. Most rhinoplasty patients in the US, in Caucasian patients, you're doing the opposite. So
do you do any blepharos down there? Like, is that
a lid lift? Yeah. So I would say lid lifts are very common down here. I mean, honestly, probably anyone over the age of 30 could benefit from a little pinch of skin removed from their upper lids. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that honestly, I think everyone would benefit from it. So it's very common. It's very easy to do. Actually, one big difference between Dallas, at DPSI and my practice here in Florida is that if there's a surgery that can be done under local anesthesia, I do it here under local anesthesia. Or at least I offer it under local anesthesia.
For our audience who doesn't understand what that means, can you explain that?
So I don't know what it is in Florida, but people are definitely afraid of anesthesia here in Florida for whatever reason. I never really feel that in New York. I didn't really feel that in Texas. Obviously it's a little scary, you go to sleep, but they're like deathly afraid of anesthesia here in Florida. So
really?
A lot of patients that'll be one of the stipulations is I'll have surgery, but I don't want to go to sleep. So there's a good amount of surgery that we can do. There's more than you would think we can do actually with the patient awake.
Where does it top
they have
at?
Yeah, so basically they're awake.
Yeah, so basically they're awake, so they can follow directions. You're not totally awake, but you have
kind of like when you're at a dentist, they drink your laughing gas.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then just like you get the Novocaine shot of the dentist, we give you lidocaine here, so you're numb. You feel that initial part to numb you, and then theoretically we can do most things with you numb, as long as the surgery doesn't take too long. So I do facelifts under local anesthesia. I do every lid surgery, upper lower lids under local anesthesia. I'll do lipo sometimes under local. I like doing lipo asleep because I feel like I can be more aggressive, but I'll do it under local too. Most surgeries, probably the only surgery that I can offer under local is a rhinoplasty or like a true rhinoplasty, because it's just not safe. When you're doing a rhinoplasty, there's a little bit bleeding, and as most people know, your nose connects to your mouth. So if you bleed that way and you're not fully protecting your airway, it's not very safe. So
Oh wow.
rhinoplasty I do always under general anesthesia, and tummy tucks. But basically every other surgery I have or can do under local anesthesia.
And when you do have an anesthesiologist, how important is to have a great one?
To have a what?
Like, Dr. Warwick always would say, he always wants to have people that are better than him. He always referred to as anesthesiologist. Like, you always want them to be better than you. How true is that statement?
So in Dallas, they use only anesthesiologists. Here, my practice here, we almost always use CRNAs, which are the certified nurse anesthetists. So the difference is that if you use a CRNA, the surgeon technically is responsible for everything medically, legally that happens in the operating room. It's not split between the anesthesiologist, who's an MD, and the surgeon. The actual workload, though, this is all they do. This is all CRNAs do day in and day out is anesthesia. So they're very good at what they do. They can do a good job of it. It's nice to have that safety from the surgeon's perspective. It's nice to have that comfort to know the person on the other side of the drapes, the anesthesiologist, is totally responsible. You don't have to even look at them. When you're using a CRNA, you have to be a little bit more, at least aware, even though they're the expert in anesthesia, you're still aware. I've had no issues using a CRNA. Now, at the same time, remember, this is not any surgery. We're operating on healthy patients. We're doing safe surgery. Everything about it is intended to be as safe as possible. We're not in the business of doing unsafe complication surgery. We have to do complication-free, no issues, smooth as butter surgery. So we kind of do a lot of pre-screening to select patients to make sure they're as safe as possible.
And I haven't had any.
And that's awesome. So let me ask you this. Now that you've been there for a year, you're living that Florida life, is there anything new that you started doing that you normally haven't been doing, or is everything about the same?
It's kind of the same. I mean, I've moved so much. I feel like I've lived almost everywhere. I haven't, but I feel like I've moved so much. I've kind of seen a different part of the country and lived a different part of the country with totally different people. I mean, Texas is so different than New York, is so different than California. And I lived in Baltimore. I lived in New Haven. So to me, it's really not that different. I actually was very familiar with South Florida before I came down here because I spent a lot of my vacation time here. So it was a very smooth and easy transition. Obviously, the beach is here. You can do that. It's beautiful. I just recently learned how to drive sticks. I felt like I'd take that off the docket list of things to do and learn.
Nice.
So other than that, no, it's the same. It's more of the same.
So what I always ask this to everyone: do you not have a 5-year mindset of where you see yourself, either yourself or your practice, or where do you see yourself in 5 years?
So I don't know if this is where it's coming from, but that sounds like a very Rourke mind-like thought. So having a 5-year plan, I think, or sort of going through that exercise, that mental exercise, is good, and I think is a great thing to do. I have a vague idea. It's not as sort of delineated very sharply, like at 5 years, I need to be doing this. But for sure, I see myself growing my practice as much as possible in these first few years, hustling as much as possible. I would like to focus increasingly on rhinoplasty because, again, that's sort of my greatest interest. Right now, I probably do a lot of rhinoplasty, more than I anticipated during this transition to Florida, but not as much as I would like. I would like to do even more. Probably I do a lot of mommy makeovers because there's a lot of mommies out there, and a lot of that in Florida in general. And also mommy makers is another surgery where there's a lot of mommy groups on Facebook. People will travel for the right surgeon, and so they see your content on Instagram. So I have all my before and afters on my Instagram, bellamy.md. And, so you'll have patients traveling from all over to see you specifically. So I see myself trying to push that sort of, that business more and more towards rhinoplasty, but still kind of doing everything. I do like to mix it up, but again, rhinoplasty is one of those procedures where the more specialized you are, the better. So that's where I see myself probably in 5 years.
That's awesome, man. So we're coming across the past 40th minute mark, probably close to 50, which is dope. I always ask people this. This is called the Positive Vibes Only Show. And, what would your standout message be to someone who's trying to be a surgeon, but they can't see how because they don't have the same advantages as most?
Right. Yeah. So if you're in that position where, you have a dream of maybe you see the long road, the 15 years that it takes to get there, and you think that's worth it, which I would encourage 100%. But you don't know how to start. I would start kind of like I did and take it, one day at a time, one step at a time. Find yourself a good mentor. I think that's the single most important thing you can do is find a good mentor and don't underestimate yourself, which is what I was doing in the beginning. Take that risk. Don't underestimate yourself and find that one mentor. And I think by taking those baby steps, one thing will lead to the next, the butterfly effect we were talking about, and you'll find yourself at the end of the road where you want to be.
I think this episode is going to be called the butterfly effect.
The butterfly effect. I like it. It's so true.
Why the butterfly effect? What drew you to it?
It's just something I've seen over and over, and something I think about all the time when I reflect is, what if this one event had turned out differently? Where would I be right now? And I know for a fact it could be wildly different. So, and I do think about that all the time. Positive or negative, there's things that sort of happen throughout your life and they shape you and they shape the trajectory of your life, for better or worse. But, I think no matter how you spin it, they're all formative experiences and they kind of make you who you are today. And it's overall something that, I wouldn't change probably anything if I went back in time, but I still can appreciate how every single one thing could have been totally different if it happened differently.
That's actually mind blowing talking about it. So that's a good way to segue. So before we get off, is there any social handles, any sites that you want the audience to go to? I'll be happy to post them. For instance, if they want to contact you for your services, where can they find you?
Just my Instagram handle at Bellamy.md that you have. That's probably the only one really that I need to make sure we link.
Okay, cool. And so other than that, man, thank you for coming on. It's been a treat, man. Honestly, it's good to talk to you. It honestly feels like we just talked yesterday. And yeah, man.
Yeah, I know.
I know it's crazy. I actually saw Rorik not too long ago. I saw him on his birthday, and that was cool. Nice. Yeah. I gave him that hand sculpture and his painting.
Yeah.
So
I know we didn't talk about this much. We didn't talk about this much during the podcast too much. But another thing is, I have taken all of the videography and photography stuff that we were always reviewing and try to blow it up with that in my own practice, because obviously I'm doing my own videos, my own photos, doing my own editing right now. Eventually I'll probably hand that off to someone, but it's very important to know to do it yourself, at least for a little while, so you know what matters, what's doable.
Oh my God.
That's gonna be very invaluable to you, because you'll know they'll be bullshitting you.
Right, exactly. I'll know if someone's bullshitting me. I'm like, no, you can definitely do that.
This is gonna take 4 hours to render. Bullshit.
Like, no way.
It's a 30-second clip.
Exactly.
Anyway, real quick, because I did want to ask, how's your room working out? The one that you had a limited space.
Oh yeah. So, whenever you join a practice, I mean, I'm sure everyone has different experience, but at least my experience was joining an older established surgeon who's kind of got his space and in his mind how he sees it, coming in with new ideas. Something that was very important to me that wasn't really important to him was to have a good photo studio, because I recognize in 2022, 2021, that time, the importance and the value of social media, good before and afters. You got to prove every day that you are a great surgeon.
To believe it.
Yeah, exactly. So it was extremely important that I was able to offer my patients excellent before and after photos. So I wanted a good photo studio. I had to kind of fight tooth and nail to get it. I did eventually get it. I have a very nice room dedicated to just photos. I have my own camera, obviously, with a strobe flash and everything. It's a quality photo studio. It's definitely functional. And, I bought some other nice little tools. I have this really cool C-arm thing I use in the OR to film operative cases. And I've made some I made some time lapses in the OR of surgeries, which I think are really cool. I don't post them too much on social media because they kind of freak people out to literally see everything.
You should do it with
It's kind of like watch
Pro.
a whole surgery. Yeah, you can watch a whole 3-hour surgery in like 30 seconds. You know,
That's,
and it looks
that's
like
fire. There's definitely a demo for that. There's a crowd for that for sure.
Yeah, I maybe I need like an OnExpanse or a Patreon or something
Patreon.
to put that on, you know, because
That'd be your third tier for the super weirdos.
Yeah, exactly. Because putting on
That's
Instagram,
cool.
half the time when I post stuff like that on Instagram, I get like, you know, people are just freaked out by.
Yeah, it's 50. Half are squeamish, half are like, that's what's
I
up.
love it. Yeah, exactly.
Cool, man. Well, I'm excited for you, man. And so once again, thank you for taking some time out of your Sunday. I know like you have a busy week ahead.
Yeah, of course.
But
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Give my regards to Catherine, man. And whenever you're in Dallas, let me know, man. It'd be good to just catch up and see you, man.
No, I will do that.
I've actually been talking to Ira. He should be creeping on next, but you know who already verified who's going to be coming on.
Rorik? Oh man, there we go. The
legend himself.
Yeah. You know, we've been building up to it, right? So it'll be kind of cool, man, because you know, it's kind of like, I had all your children on. It's like,
yeah, no, that's funny because actually, everyone, actually, all of us, even Ed Shimada, we're all tied through Rorik, one way or another.
Yeah, and so I was like, even Yash reached out to me. He was like, "Hey, what's going on with all this plastic surgery? What's your focus on?" And I was like, "Me." I was like, I'm just doing me, man. I just happen to meet these cool people because, you know, like I've interviewed anywhere from a gallery assistant to photographers to veterans to TikTokers to surgeons. So I think it makes it for a better podcast to have different variety.
Right. Yeah. No.
Cool, man.
I mean, awesome that you're doing that, man. I checked out your other ones. I'm looking forward to seeing this one.
Well, trust me, it's gonna be a good one. And I think this is a very informative one. If anything, I think the other ones were a little more like fun and a little this, but I think there's a lot of substance as far as like if someone wanted to pursue what to kind of expect,
right,
as far as like the journey goes. So with that being said, guys, once again, you can catch us on Spotify, catch us on YouTube. So once that's out, I'll send the links your way and all that good stuff. So other than that, man, thank you so much, Justin. And guys, till next time, we're out.
PVO. Positive vibes. This is the PVO show.